Whether it's bad planning, bad luck, bad timing, or bad inventions, well-intentioned bad decisions have plagued history for thousands of years. Welcome to Historic Hindsight.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're going to talk to you about cowboys and Indians.
That's right, Johnny. Cowboys and Indians, or really more just what the awful white man
Probably
did,
cowboys and Native Americans now,
did
right?
to Native.
Because
And I'm going to go ahead and apologize up front. Me and Johnny really didn't know what to wear for this episode because what we're actually talking about are Native American boarding schools or Indian boarding schools.
What?
And the awful things that the white men did to rob, rape, and pillage culture from the Native Americans to make them white.
So I had a general gist of what this was. I assumed that this took place in like the 16, 17, 1800s when we were, killing them with smallpox too. We then had to board them in schools and do that. That's not.
Oh, and that's it. But it kept.
Okay,
there you go.
It happened.
Going.
No, it stopped after.
It kept going.
We became
America
up
until.
And started treating people when we decided to start calling them Native Americans instead of Indians.
80s
is when it stopped. What? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the 80s.
It goes on to
we were doing this.
Yeah, actually, there's still technically some of these schools open today.
Okay, so we gave them free education.
Sure. So the Indian boarding schools are also known as
what is it?
Also known as the Indian residential schools, was a program that existed all the way up to 1978 officially, before there were some laws that came into place to kind of end it. But it started as far back as, the official program started as far back as 1819, but this idea of educating Native Americans to make them civilized, to more of the white man's way, goes back to the moment the Pilgrims hit the Mayflower thing.
Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of their thing, they're spreading their little religion and and they have these people that can't even read a language that's not theirs. And so, I mean, come on, you got to teach them how to read, right?
Yeah.
And about how to put on clothes, maybe.
Yeah, in reality,
even though they had full clothes.
The idea is, it sounds good, build schools for people who don't have schools, except they did have schools, and
oh, what?
It's not teaching them our ways in addition to theirs. It's absolutely forbidding them to practice their ways. So
so not that we're not teaching them their way, because obviously we wouldn't be able to do that. We don't know their ways. It's saying, okay, this is the way, and you cannot learn about that
through very, very harsh punishments.
Which
the whole idea is going to be summarized by a quote by Captain Richard H. Pratt, who's one of the people who in the mid 1800s was really responsible for the bad schools, and his quote is, "Kill the Indian, save the man." So take anything that's indigenous and get rid of it, and then you have an educated white man in his place. Kill the Indian.
I imagine there was also another side to that exact same quote where they literally made Native Americans, because they weren't Indians. We called them that because we thought we landed in India.
Yeah, very much so.
Like, that's just ridiculous that it lasted as long as it did.
Yeah.
But so it's also, I imagine also it's to paint them as very dangerous
savages, because
there's
a little bit of a war going on.
And if you kill them, you're going to save these white men that are obviously the ones who belong in North America.
So this episode, if you're wondering why we're doing an episode on this, is actually thanks to Johnny and my wife, because they read a newspaper article a couple of weeks ago about 215. You read a meme.
No, I saw
on
a
the
headline.
Internet. You saw a headline on the internet.
I saw a headline.
That the 215 bodies that were found in a Canadian Indian boarding school, and their souls were crushed. You're like, how could the Canadians have done this? And I had to crush their souls. And
only because they were Canadians.
Oh, sweet child. We did it far worse.
I knew how white people could do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, God, I mean, yes.
We did it far worse.
I was just surprised because the Canadians are supposed to be so nice.
Yeah, so like I said, not ancient history. Started in 1819 and lasted through 1978. As of 2007, most but not all the Indian boarding schools were closed, but there were still 900.
Most but not all.
Yeah, there were still 9,500 Native American children in what are considered Indian boarding schools.
How many schools were there? How prevalent are these? Is this like once we kind of confined them to their reservations, just put one up on every reservation?
Yeah,
or near one, or like what?
There were 357 known schools in the United States.
Holy cow! So a couple thousand.
Known schools, because there was no regulation or centralized system in place to really dictate the school system. It's not like elementary schools.
They didn't have like a school board president.
Yeah, there's not a school standard thing going on here. So
PTO.
So to answer some of these questions, Johnny, where, how, when, and why, all that fun stuff. So pretty much as soon as Europeans landed on what is now the United States, they have been at odds with natives. Go figure, coming over and trying to take land.
As soon as we invaded their land, they got mad at us.
Yep. So one way to combat this was aside from outright slaughter or spreading of diseases, was to try to educate them on our ways, so that way they wouldn't be at odds. So if we taught them how to farm our way, we wouldn't. Well, that doesn't really work because we were starving when we came over, and they had to teach us.
Yeah.
Weird. Anyways, we'll get there,
right?
Because that's going to come back. But if you teach them our ways, then maybe they won't. Instead of living in a hut, they'll live in a cabin. I don't know.
Yeah, they had all sorts of different permanent structures.
Yeah,
like,
sure did.
The teepees were like
plains Indians.
Like you go on a hunting trip and
Yeah.
stuff. And like that wasn't anyway.
Yeah, and you would do this by stripping them of their
eventually.
traditions, instilling more European views, and by that I mean Christian views, and then they become civilized.
Right.
In 1790, Henry Knox...
Yes, easy.
Yeah, right? In 1790, Henry Knox wrote a letter to George Washington, the George Washington, stating, quote, "How different would be the sensation of a philosophic mind to relate that instead of exterminating a part of the human race by our modes of population, that we preserved through all difficulties and at last had imparted our knowledge and cultivation in the arts." So instead of outright killing them, we'll just
What if
kill
we
their
could
traditions.
just convert them?
Convert them to us, yeah.
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 Okay. I guess that is less inhumane, slightly.
It's still
than
cultural
just being
genocide.
like, we'll murder all of them. But yeah, it's not.
This is the opposite
Not
of
much.
Yeah, this is the opposite of cultural appropriation. This is cultural depropriation.
This is we don't like any of your culture,
yeah.
so if you could get rid of it, become a Christian, and then I don't know, stop bathing because cleanliness is not something that we have any
So
part
we
of.
like it, yeah.
You guys are way too clean. Why are you bathing all the time? Stop, and then we'll give you more smallpox and other diseases, and
It'll be okay.
eventually you won't be a problem anymore.
These
for
boarding
us.
schools really kick off with the assimilation movement, and which is the whole idea of assimilating them into our culture as opposed to outright genocide, which we were also doing at the same time.
Sure, okay.
And it all starts.
Now, assimilation. Do I know assimilation from this, or was the assimilation also used with civil rights and integration and everything? Or
You're probably learning of it.
Because I remember
in
talking about
yes,
assimilation.
briefly.
Briefly.
It would be this. It would be these programs.
But the way we talked about it is that we were very kind to allow the natives to assimilate into our society.
Yeah.
That we brought from Europe into North America.
Yeah. Well,
it was so nice of us to assimilate them into work. God, this education system, Tommy.
Yeah, keep that in mind because it all starts with the Civilization Fund Act of 1819, which happened on March 3rd, 1819. And basically,
Now that's Civilization Fund Act,
yeah.
not Fun Act.
Yeah, fund
Okay.
fund as in money.
Okay.
And what this does is
That makes more sense.
it provides funds to give to not just missionaries but any organization that wants to build a school to teach the Native Americans the white man's way.
Oh, nobody exploited this.
Yeah, so think about that. Any group could get it. So if you were, what is it? There's South Park made fun of it. There's the NAMBLA, North American Man Boy Love Association, NAMBLA. So if NAMBLA wanted to make a Native American school to teach them the white man way, where they would not at all rape these poor little boys or girls, yeah,
that's fine. Go ahead. Well, if you want to educate them on the white way, or really, actually, just brainwash them and make them forget about their own culture, or if not forgetting, I'm guessing feel real bad about it and belittle it and tell them that they were heathens for worshiping whatever spiritual inclinations they had, whatever the case is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right on the money there, Johnny, because there's absolutely no government oversight, especially in these early schools, other than like, all right, you got a school set up for the Native Americans, here's some money for you, have at it. There were some...
go ahead and start filing them in. Okay, so
there were some direct government schools. Yeah, there were some direct government schools, but over a third of the 357 schools that we know of were some relation to a Christian organization, a lot of them being the Catholics. And the Catholics were particularly awful schools, which we'll get into here in a second.
Still are.
Which is still, Catholic schools nowadays still aren't that. This is what we do to nice Catholic kids. Can you imagine what they did to people who they thought were less than Catholic children?
We're not humans. Yeah. It's not great. Probably.
And ironically, there were already tons of schools within the Native American communities, including the first women's college in the United States. Was a Native American school. But since it wasn't run by white people...
Okay, well... now this is so the white man, some white man wanted to collect money from the government to open up a school to educate Native Americans, and he thought, you know what? I think the Native American women are in particular underserved and need a better opportunity. So I'm going to open up just a women's college.
Well, no. This was before. This was the Native Americans had their own college system set up, their own education.
Oh, they had one.
Yeah, so this was their.
I thought you were saying this was the white people doing this.
No. One of the first women's colleges in the United States was actually a Native American school that was run by Native Americans. So we come in thinking that they need education, and they already have a college system.
Well, they do. They do. No. Okay, what's their college teaching them, Tommy? How to be at one with the earth and completely survive as a independent race for many, 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 many generations, probably longer than the Europeans, and how to do, mathematics and agricultural and history and stuff? Is that what they're going to teach them? That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous, Johnny.
They were barely surviving hunter-gatherers before the white people came over and spread their knowledge about how to nearly starve to death the first winter because they don't know what the hell's going on.
Obviously, this money they're just giving out with very little government oversight. You need somebody to direct that government oversight, and this whole assimilation project in and of itself, which also leads into the whole... We'll get there. In 1824, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is going to be created to oversee these funds and other programs deemed towards civilizing the natives. So this is all the assimilation stuff going on here. And however, more often than not, that Bureau of Indian Affairs was not so... I should not be wearing a Pinkerton badge because they weren't so kind to the natives, and neither was the Bureau of Indian Affairs so kind to the natives.
Okay, all right. Tommy, aside from John Smith, name me a white person kind to the natives.
Johnny, they weren't kind to the natives, so you're right. There was a lot. But the whole Trail of Tears things were from the early 1800s to mid-1800s. We're forcibly removing natives from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Right, I remember my 8th grade social studies book had a one-paragraph blurb about on the Trail of Tears that we had to read.
That was our first.
Apparently, it was a long walk, and some people died during it.
Yeah, lots of people died.
Because they were so tired.
It's very much the same ideas that somebody would use in the 1940s to contain a group of people in Germany that they didn't like into a specific area. So they transferred them from one area to another area. The ghetto... That was Hitler.
Wait,
Hitler
okay.
Did that. We got
to move them with trains.
And so we did the same. So we did the same thing, but we didn't give them trains. We made them walk. We made them walk from swamp-ass Florida all the way out to the desert in Arizona.
No, see, okay, all right, that's not entirely fair, Tommy. Hitler used concentration camps to collect people. We simply concentrated the people
on reservations
in a certain area inside of a camp.
Anywho, in 1891, the government made attendance to these schools mandatory and compulsory. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Okay, but that was my how earlier. How do they enforce this? How do they get the native children? I assume this is this all age groups,
Okay.
or is this like a standard American education
This
system?
would be your American education system-ish age group. Yes.
And so they're basically just being like they're enforcing our K through 12 or whatever it was at the time. But
at a
K through 12
boarding
type mentality
at a boarding school where
Okay.
they're not home on a regular basis, where they're
right. Oh
living
no,
on the
obviously
school's grounds.
it's college for everybody.
It's college for everybody. This is your free college, guys. This is it. This is what.
Okay,
this is
and
what-
then
this is
so
what you
how do
get.
they get the? This is how do they get
All right, so once we start the
the
whole
people to go to
yes,
it?
so once we start the whole reservation programs, the Indians that are not on the reservations are in active rebellion against these United States. So that's where you get the Indian Wars that come
You
in.
don't say.
The ones that are on the reservations,
Why would they be against any of this? That doesn't make sense.
the ones that are on the reservations, since we put the reservations on land that's not suitable for human existence, for easy human existence, they becim very much dependent.
Wait.
when you-
so where do we put them?
in the middle of the desert.
That's not where they naturally were. They were in the areas that were very fertile soil and
Yep.
and easy to farm, and
So they
were
become-
there, and then we put them not.
Yep. So they become
anymore.
very much dependent
Okay.
upon the white man, the government, to give them food, to give them clothing, give them their daily penance of money, because we're compensating them
What
appropriately.
a weird coincidence that they are now completely dependent on the American government.
Yeah, so if you want your money, if you want your food, if you want your housing, if you want your nudies, if you want your clothing, your children damn well better go to those schools. In 1895, Johnny, 19 men of the Hopi Nation were imprisoned and sent to Alcatraz. Alcatraz, which I didn't know was around in 1895, but Alcatraz in 1895,
old, yeah.
19 Hopi tribe members were sent there because they refused to send their children to these schools.
No. Alcatraz was made for the very worst, most dangerous criminals, Tommy. These men clearly carried out a mass murder spree across the nation and were captured and then sent to Alcatraz. It was not a failure to send their children to a concentration camp to be brainwashed and indoctrinated into Western society.
Now, by
It was?
by 1885, there were 106 of these schools that were known to be established at that point in time, and most of them were put in old military installations left over from the Civil War.
Wait,
Odd. Schools in military
in old
installations.
military installation. What the fuck? You
All right,
can't.
Johnny. This is where we pause.
Built for education.
And this is where we pause because you're now mad because you heard the military. This is where it gets dark, so buckle up. Jokes will be had. I mean no offense, but the system is just so outrageously ridiculous that I have to laugh at it. Johnny has to laugh at it. But buckle up.
I have to laugh. It's a defense mechanism because otherwise I'll implode.
These schools, a lot of them were ran like military installations. The children wore military
course,
uniforms.
because they were
had
put on military
doctrine-
installations.
Yeah, they had military doctrine,
Military uniforms?
Yes. So first things first, anything indigenous was forbade. That meant language, clothing, music, hairstyles, dancing,
Hairstyles?
religion. Anything that was native was stripped. So the first thing that would happen when you were a little
How?
kid, and
What is a non-native hairstyle?
So Johnny, your hair right now would be
Shave it?
kind of native, because
I'm native. This is native. It's long hair,
it's
right?
long hair. Yeah,
I got my quarantine flow going.
Yeah. So the first thing that would happen to these children when they arrive, everything native would be taken away from them. All their belongings, all their clothing would be replaced with military-style clothing. Their hair would be cut.
Every piece of their personal identity.
Every piece of their personal identity.
Every piece of it.
Their hair would be cut to European standards, which for men meant basically a buzz bowl cut, real short, and for the girls, kind of the same thing, short. Short.
Yeah.
Which a Native American, a lot of Native American, I'm going to lump Native Americans in one. There are thousands of Native American tribes with different levels of culture, so understand that. But
very different.
In a lot of Native American cultures, long hair is a sense of pride. It's like you grew your hair out long, you had the braids. It was like honor.
In addition to that, they believe that their long hair helped them have more of a connection to nature and be able to have a better perception of and feel kind of nature better. They felt that hair helped them because there's wind and everything else, but it helped them be more of a part of and be better hunters and everything else.
There are pictures of barbershop chairs where these kids would be en masse lined up, getting their heads shaved, kind of like a military installation is.
So it's looking like, basically we're saying you're going to join the army recruits. And this is an army
I'm going to put
school.
Yeah, I'm going to put a picture of some of the confiscation of property and the hair that got cut, because these are very, and I'm not trying to just be a sarcastic ass joke making fun of, because we always talk about Hitler. They are very eerily similar pictures to the concentration camps. I mean, very, very eerily similar pictures.
Because the end goal was the same. The end goal was, we don't want to have two cultures, theirs and ours. We want our culture. And to do that, we get rid of theirs.
If you were caught speaking your native language, your mouth could be washed out with lye soap, not Dawn dish soap, lye soap, which is very harsh and causes chemical burns if you just put it in your friggin' mouth. Your face would
lie's not friendly.
Your face would be beaten. You'd be subject to harsh beatings. Written language, same things. Your hands would be beaten. Your fingers could be broken. If you were caught wearing Native American garbs, you'd be stripped naked and sent naked down hallways. If you were caught practicing tribal religions or practicing tribal dances and that kind of stuff, you could be subjected to lack of food, put out in harsh conditions, work details. You name whatever you can think of as what you might punish somebody for.
Camps.
Prison would be the same thing that these kids would be punished for. And these are children anywhere from,
now
5,
also
5 to 17 or 18. Yeah, I mean these are young kids.
Also, let's be
young adults.
Yeah, let's be very, very clear about this, too. It says, if you do these things. They weren't punished and beaten and everything else just for doing those things. The Stanford prison experiment showed that normal-ass college kids thrown together and given power and no power will start abusing that power in a matter of weeks. This was an open invitation for the people running these schools to abuse, rape, punish, get their whatever out on these children.
Particular attention was paid to little girls because the idea there was
you don't say.
If you break the little girl, as a mother, she will teach teach her children. It's better that the generational impact if you break the little girl.
Right, because she's going to be pregnant when she's 11, 12, 13 years old anyway. Because
and breaking the little girl meant beating everything savage out of her, or raping everything savage out of her, because rapes were very, very prevalent in these schools.
Yeah, of course. But listen to what you're saying: beating and raping the savage out of them.
Yes.
The savage. What is more savage than that?
The children were forced to convert to Christianity in most of these schools, which, let that sink in. I'm pretty sure the First Amendment says that's not allowed, but...
No, that is... No, freedom of religion meant freedom of Christianity, Tommy.
Freedom to be a Christian, These Christian schools reportedly had the worst. Specifically, the Catholic schools had the worst, although the Catholic schools the Catholic Church itself continues to deny any wrongdoing in any of these schools in North America, whether it be Canadian or otherwise.
At least they've admitted to all the wrongdoing they did in their own schools in the past couple of hundred years.
There's that too.
As far as child abuse goes.
Yeah,
they're very, for a fucking religion that has a booth to confess your sins, they sure don't want to talk about the shit they've done.
Yeah, survivors are still very much alive in today's world of this system, because, like I said, the schools were in prevalent use up to the 1970s. They suffer from...
until my oldest brother was born, when the year it stopped happening. What the fuck?
They suffer very much from PTSD,
You don't say.
Surprise. And
I'm sure they get proper treatment for it, though.
The schools that exist now, that existed right before they closed were obviously a lot better than the schools that existed in the time period that me and Johnny are dressed as, because the time period that me and Johnny are dressed as.
Yeah.
So I'll take this time for a brief, quick 2 seconds. Social services didn't exist yet in this time frame. Even in 1970, by the time these schools closed because social services start to exist. And the first social services laws that start to exist are because of these schools.
So when was the social services were like mid 70s
1978.
or that year?
Yeah, 1978.
They got established, and then they're like,
well, they get us.
You're doing it wrong.
We'll get there, but yeah. So
Stop. Okay.
And so up until this point in time, if you beat your kid, like your neighbor either had two choices. Your neighbor would do nothing about it. They could watch you beat your kid half to death and be like, well, that's just Cletus. And, maybe little Timmy.
Oh, man, you know what? I swear to God, his kid shouldn't have mouthed off.
Or they could, take that child in themselves, kind of like kidnapping, which was done very prevalently with the Native American children. Christians that couldn't have babies would go to these reservations and be like, look, that poor little kid is starving because he's only eating, fry bread, because that's the only thing that we're providing for him. So we'll take him in and we'll care for him because his parents can't. Literally stealing children from their parents.
This is white people shopping for cute little natives.
Yeah, that was very big prominent. And
it doesn't matter what their excuse is why they want him at this point. It doesn't. None of them. Nobody cares. Yeah, Nobody's going to be like, "Oh no, you can't take that native baby." Nobody's going to say that.
So there's a woman that I read a good article on. She wrote a good article about her mother. Her name is Mary Annette Pember. Her mother was, lived through one of these schools, one of these Catholic schools. And had a particularly bad, and this is how I'm going to leave it. And I'm not going to get into any other details of what atrocities happened. Let your mind do the thing. Rape, murder, pillage, robbery.
Look up the book.
There are documentaries.
Go read that book.
Just do a documentary. Click documentary search. Indian boarding schools. There are several documentaries that are out there on YouTube for free to watch. They are awful and atrocious, and they remind you of concentration camps. So her mother, like I said, went to one of these Catholic schools. They had a particularly bad nun named Sister Mary Catherine. One day, she's telling the story of how...
Why is it always Marys?
Yeah, right. So one day, Sister Mary Catherine is walking... It's around Christmas time. She's walking down the flight of stairs to the cellar to see if the kids have stolen any food, because she's out to basically beat the crap, like find an excuse to beat these kids.
She's looking for a reason to justify to herself, not to anybody else, but to herself as a reason she needs to beat these children.
And you might be asking yourself, why is she checking to see if they stole food? Well, because she's actively withholding food from these children because they have been particularly bad this week.
Starving them and then making them... Yeah.
So as she's walking down the stairs, Sister Mary Catherine slips and falls, smashes her head on the side of a step or a table or something, cracks her head open, and she dies. Oh no!
And nothing of value was lost.
And so Mary Annette Pember, her mother tells her the story, and so she goes off and she's trying to... Every time she went to her mother and asked her about her experiences in these schools, her mother would like, why do you want to just go away? Like most survivors of traumatic shit, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to relive
PTSD.
it. So like,
that's why your grandfather doesn't want to talk about World War II with you.
Yeah, so she went up... well, Vietnam probably more now, the people watching us. These
days, but I grew up hearing that grandfathers would never talk about World War II. So yeah, Vietnam.
Anyways, so she went and searched to see about these schools, to see what information she could find on them. So she goes to the Wisconsin National Archives and finds the documents from the school, which are very, very sparse. And by very, very sparse, I mean they have the names of the kids that attended and if they graduated, ran away, or died. That's it. No grades. No, incoming, outcoming records of, supplies.
Because it doesn't matter, because it's not really about education.
But in those records...
It's about stripping them, beating them, and making them white.
In those records, she finds a document, from the church's document, which is a letter dictating how Sister Mary Catherine died in the exact set of circumstances that this mother, that Mary's mother told her about. So she goes, well, this is it. This is my smoking gun. This is the connection. I have to choose to believe this has to be, my mom's stories have to be true because... This is a confirmed part of it. Now, when Mary's mother told the story, she has a couple of particular quotes that I want to focus in on to really let it sink in on how bad these schools were. She says, once they heard that Sister Mary Catherine had died, she said, and I quote, "What a silent cheer us kids made. Maybe it was terrible, but it was the best Christmas present that we could ever get." Yeah, you're probably right. It probably was the absolute best Christmas present.
Absolutely.
I don't feel any bit of remorse for people who beat and tortured children, regardless of whatever the hell the rules or systems are.
No, Mary can go fuck herself. Sorry, Sister. No, not sorry, Sister Mary. Go fuck yourself, Sister Mary.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, Sister Mary. Now, deaths, as I talked about, because they would keep death records, as evidenced by the mass graves that were found, 215 graves that were found in the school up in Canada. Thousands upon thousands of children died in these schools. Could you imagine going? There were 3 kids. There were 3 kids that died in the time that I was in school. From the time I moved to Indiana in 5th grade to the time that I graduated, I know of 3 kids that died before we got to graduation.
I had.
One of them was like a fluke heart, and 2 were accidents, car accidents.
I had 2 die during, and then 2 die shortly after. Graduation,
and that was like awestruck.
And it was
like
suicide. It was suicide, drowning, a rare disease, and then cancer.
Yeah, and so and how traumatic is that? How traumatic is that?
It was horrid. It was awful.
215 kids in one school's graveyard. That's just the bodies they found. The Canadian government expects to find more.
That's the
bodies
bodies
on
they
this
bothered
grounds.
to bury.
So the Canadian government, unlike the United States, has publicly apologized for the schools, states that they acknowledge that the abuses were rampant, and have gone to the extent now of trying to find survivors from these schools to get their stories written down. Now, in the United States, we have denied.
So they're trying their very best in Canada to actually correct their wrongs and preserve the history of these people who are in very real danger and probably will actually happen regardless of how hard they try. Their stories are going to be lost.
Yes, yeah. Unlike in the United States, where the only apology that any government has acknowledged was Obama, and I think it was 2008 or 2009, publicly apologized for a general treatment of white men to Native Americans, which is funny that the black president is the one who's like, I apologize, but there's no direct reference to the schools. There's no acknowledgement of the schools records.
Well, no, because
they have been destroyed.
So basically, Obama's like, you know what? I kind of have to talk about the atrocities against the native peoples. But if he doesn't just give a general blanket statement, he would be putting on a 72-hour speech apologizing for all of the horrendous things that the United States government did to the native people.
By the way, in the United States, even though there are survivors that are still around, any of the deaths, well, not deaths, but the abuses that are sustained, all that stuff that has happened, even if you could prove it, most of the statute of limitations have passed.
Yeah, of course.
Which is mind-numbingly
why
what the
they
hell.
Don't care so much about bringing it up anymore. Because they're like, well, what are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? It is estimated that up to 20,000 children, Native American children, died in the United States. I think that estimate is reasonable, but probably a little low. So if you look at the Canadian school, 215 deaths in the Canadian school, say even half, even half of that, say it's only 100,000. Over 357 known schools, that's 35,000 deaths. At half of what was in that Canadian school. So I think the deaths are absolutely outrageous. Now the idea here with these schools is once they were stripped of their culture, they would be sent back after graduating back into the reservations, because they're still not white. So they're going back to the reservations where they're supposed to spread the white man's ways, which part of that whole was teaching them how to farm the white man way, which is the most hilariously stupid fucking thing I've ever heard of in my life, because they taught us how to farm. We grow nothing but corn in Indiana.
These motherfuckers.
We grow nothing but corn in Indiana. What do you think we learned how to grow the corn? And soybeans. Where do you think we learned how to grow the corn from?
But do you want to know why we grow corn and soybeans? Because the fucking natives taught us that you can't grow the same damn crop over and over and over and over again, or it's going to fuck up your soil.
And And why do we need to teach the natives how to farm on the reservations? Because we put them in the fucking desert!
Now, so the idea is...
But the problem with all this...
You take a... No, wait, give me
yeah,
just 1 second to figure this out. You take a child, you bring him into your boarding school, you strip him of everything that he knows, you teach him whatever bullshit Christianity, white way thing of doing everything is, and then you put him back where he came from and expect him to be able to do the same thing to everybody else.
Yeah, or even
to
just...
tell them
or even
in
just,
a way... Or is it just they don't give a shit about them? Yeah. They just wanted to abuse children.
Yeah, because what happens is these kids come leaving these schools not knowing how to live in the white man's world because they're not white, so they can't just fit into the white man's world. They go back to the native world where
because we made sure that nobody not white could live in our world.
Where they get ostracized and treated as second-class citizens in the native world because they don't know anything about their native heritage, can't speak the language,
because
can't write the language, can't do any of that kind of stuff because they've got it stripped away from them. So now they're a kid stuck in between two worlds, and you wonder why rampant alcoholism and suicide is the way it is on these reservations, even to this fucking day. I hate white people. I mean, I like white people, but I hate white people.
No.
You know.
We are the worst.
Well, I mean, we glorify.
Many of us.
Humans are just awful. Humans
suck.
Are just the worst.
But what happened was the white people decided to be the worst of them.
Yeah.
And also we were filthy. And so when we came to North America,
that part.
We had so much disease. That is it, though.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
The natives died because they cleaned themselves and we didn't, and then they got disease because they didn't have an immune system.
So, Johnny, do you want to know what the Indian boarding school in Indiana was named?
No.
It was the Whites Manual Labor Institute, and it was run by the Quakers.
The Whites
Manual Labor Institute.
Manual Labor Institute.
How?
That's not even hiding it. That's not hiding what you're doing.
What it is. Yeah, very blatant what it is. So, like I said, this was an extremely awful program. Now, fast forward to 1978, where this stuff is still essentially going on, but now it's more adoptions, like forcible removals and adoptions that's going on, necessarily than the schools themselves.
Because we've created a rampant alcoholism within the Native American
and drug
community.
issues
now
and
we
all
can
that
go
kind
ahead
of stuff.
and.
You're right. Yep. So by 1978, as much as 25 to 35% of all Native American children living inside the United States were removed from their homes.
A quarter.
Up to 30. Yeah. That's a problem. So the Native American communities got together and said, our kids are being taken from us. We don't even believe that it's justified. They're being forced to go to these Indian boarding schools, getting stripped of their culture, like something has to change. So they petitioned the government, and the government finally looks at it and does some investigations into these schools and goes, oh my God, what are they doing to these children?
What is happening? Yeah, what? This is not, we knew this happened like a couple years ago, but now?
So
we can't do this.
The very first federal child welfare law that's on the books is the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978, or what is now known as ICWIS, which the law gives the power of oversight back to the Native American tribes of members of its tribes or members or children that could be members of the tribe. So essentially, if you have Native American blood in you, and that could enable you to be a part of a tribe, if you were to be removed by your child protective services, the state is supposed to ask that tribe of your descent if they want to take jurisdiction over the tribe.
So basically, we're giving them back the ability to self-govern.
To self-govern, yes. I will tell you from working in child protective industries, for the Department of Child Services in Indiana, over the years that I did that, what is supposed to happen is that every initial court hearing, whether it's a removal or not, at the very initial court hearing, the judge is supposed to ask the family, the parents, assuming they show up, that if that child could be a member of a Native American tribe or has Native American ancestry in them. If you say yes...
Really? That's the first general question?
That in the first part of the proceedings, that before the proceedings end, this has to be asked. And if the answer is yes,
Really?
The court system, federal court system, state court system, local court system is supposed to contact the tribe in question and ask if they want jurisdiction. Now, 9 times out of 10, if it does happen, especially there's not a lot of Native Americans in Indiana, but if it does happen, that tribe can choose whether or not to take jurisdiction over that case.
Okay. So now, if I got accused of beating my child or whatever the hell would get you a case, I walk in there and they're gonna ask if my child has any.
Yeah, regardless of what you look like, they have to ask
Native
every time.
American
Now,
Association.
That's what's supposed to happen. That's what's supposed to happen.
That's not what happens.
I can say, standing in courtroom, the countless times I've been in a courtroom as a child protective service person, 9 times out of 10 we have to remind the judge as DCS to ask that question.
To ask that question.
Like you have to ask.
Be like, oh wait, hold up, you gotta figure out if they're.
Yeah, you gotta ask that.
And I imagine the judges stop asking it because they ask it, and
it
right
just
to get out of school, and they've never gotten a yes.
I imagine.
I imagine.
Deal with this. Yeah, I imagine in Indiana, since we were very
right. Yeah, here that's what I'm talking about.
We were
locally.
Yeah, we were very successful in Indiana at getting rid of natives.
All of them.
So we don't really have.
I was a part of the Shawnee tribe in 5th grade when we talked about the 5 different whatever groups of natives, which is probably also inaccurate, whatever they told us. But I was the Shawnee tribe, and we broke everybody up. And,
we had a lot of.
I'm pretty sure we had a war at the end of it. I don't know.
Did you scalp some white men?
We just the like 6th grade class came down and just started beating all of us to give us the true native experience.
I know there was a lot of Lenape in Indiana but I don't know all the tribes that were here.
I don't know. I only know Shawnee because that was the tribe that I was in when I was in 5th grade. So that's the only tribe that I know about in Indiana. And don't know anything about them except that they existed.
But keep in mind, first off, it's a surprising thing that people learned that 1978 is the first actual federal laws in the books regulating anything regarding children.
Shocking.
So before 1978, you could beat your kid, and there really wasn't anything.
Which is why all the people raised in the 50s were like, "Well, back in my day, my parents used to beat the shit out of me, and look how I turned out. Now I want to beat children too, and like I'm normal." Like.
So since 1978 in ICWIS, pretty much all those Native American schools did get shut down, or given back to the tribes for them to look at themselves. But do yourself a favor to make yourself really quiet and depressed, because I'm going to put some pictures up here now too. Yeah, the schools that exist in reservations now are still awful because they're in disrepair and have no financial funding from the federal government, because screw you. You're an independent nation, but
you're gonna make it so we can't control you anymore and strip you of your culture, language, and everything else that you care about? F that. And you don't get any of our money.
I'm going to end this video on as much of a positive note as I can, or just irony, because I find it really hilarious. So in the middle of all this crap that's going on, after about 100 years of us doing this to the Native Americans, stripping them of their culture, we get into
100 years.
We get into a little bit of, and it's not the end of it, John. I'm just saying, over 100 years of us doing this, we get into a little bit of war.
Oh, I know.
We get into a little bit of war with the Japanese, and when we get into a little bit of a war with the Japanese, we want to come up with a foolproof code system. And we learn that, man, if we have a language in our country that nobody speaks anywhere else in the world, it would be very hard.
If only there was some tongue that hadn't made its way around the world that was concentrated here.
It would be very difficult to break that code because it's its own independent language, and then you could use those certain words to come up.
That's hard.
And so we look at these reservations. The Navajo will use their language to develop a code that we'll use in the Pacific. Oh, so hey, Pete, I know we told you not to learn your language, but can you guys remember that for a second?
Can you teach it to us?
Can you teach it so we can use it as because we can use that as a code?
We've been literally raping it out of your children for 100 years. But little help now.
And so they do, and so we draft Native Americans. We use specifically the Navajo language as a code, or as a basis of a code, and those brave,
which is large in part, like that's a big part of why we won, right?
Well,
Like
it's
that.
it, well the co- well
it's significant.
it
The
is
code-
yes
the-
it is a factor.
the-
Had we not
they're
had a
significant.
it's a significant part. It's not the I mean we won because we can make shit.
No,
really
I mean,
quick.
there's a billion
that's why we
reasons.
won.
Well,
can make things
and
faster.
also everybody else had been fighting for the previous 6 years, and we just came in at the end fully fresh, healthy,
Well,
with a lot of equipment.
yeah. Yeah,
A little bit of that.
Anyways, so
Here comes America.
so there's a big reason. If you were one of the Native Americans that volunteered for the service, and got drafted or whatever, because you can still get drafted. Because, anyways, and you are one of those code talkers, and you happen to get into a situation where you might get caught captured. We can't let that code fall into the wrong hands. So there was a significant chance that you might get a bullet to the back of the head from your own team, because we don't want that code falling into the wrong hands. So thank you for your service. And how do we honor these soldiers, Johnny? How do we honor these Native American soldiers that helped develop this code?
It's got to
for
be
us?
statues. There's
Yeah.
got to be walls built. There should be a museum.
We made just the most absolute best movie called Wind Talkers, starring Nicolas Cage, and it is just the best piece
No!
cinematic
What?
joy ever. Go home and watch it. We'll see you next week, guys.
That's it for this week in Historic Hindsight. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and join us next week when we talk about absinthe.